Hey, 42 here. Over the past 3,500 years, mankind has been at war with itself to various degrees pretty much constantly. In fact, we've only managed 268 years of world peace in all that time. Because there's always some other group of people with land that you want, a god you dislike, or just because it's Monday. And we're getting really good at war. The 20th century was a record breaker, with over 100 million dead people, proving that we really have turned into pros. None of this swords and horseback nonsense anymore. But we're also more civilized, aren't we? Only a barbarian will cut a prisoner's tongue out and put their head onto a stick. A drone and some laser-guided missiles are a far more cultured way of doing things. And since we fancied ourselves as civilized, we decided to draw up a rulebook about what you can and cannot do when it comes to killing millions of people. I know, but there's a right and a wrong way to do this. So, lock up your guillotines and hide away your mustard gas, because you're not allowed to use them anymore, you naughty tyrant, as we discover what is a war crime. For thousands of years there have been rules, both written and unwritten, about how warfare should be practiced. The Mahabharata, an epic poem from ancient India, contains a passage saying, "War should be waged for the sake of conquest. One should not be enraged towards an enemy who is not trying to kill them." This is the ancient Indian way of saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. The Bible also contains passages on war, such as banning people from cutting down trees outside the city that they're laying siege to. Apparently, "thou shalt not kill" was open to so much interpretation that in the sub-clauses it even covered gardening before a massacre. But the earliest record we have of punishment for a war crime, which wasn't just the victors punishing the losers, was when Peter von Hagenbach was beheaded by the Holy Roman Empire for his treatment of civilians during an uprising in Bresac in 1474. The reason, they said, was that his crimes were those he as a knight was deemed to have a duty to prevent. It's also the earliest example of a case involving command responsibility, since he claimed unsuccessfully that he was just following orders. The first international war crime agreement signed was the Strasbourg Agreement of the 27th of August 1675. It was between France and the Holy Roman Empire, which at this point was basically Germany, to forbid the use of poisoned bullets. Now, you'd think that this was the earliest form of chemical warfare, but in fact it had been happening for over 2,000 years. In 600 BC, the Athenians used a heart toxin taken from the hellebore plant to poison the city of Carrhae during a siege. Around 250 AD, the Persians battled the Romans in Syria by burning sulfur and bitumen to suffocate them. And in 1250, when the Chinese were fighting Genghis Khan, they made bombs out of gunpowder, feces, and a variety of poisons such as arsenic and aconite root, which caused nausea and convulsions. What a lovely sounding cocktail, but I think I'll take a martini, thanks. At the end of the 19th century, many of the major powers were beginning to think that maybe there was a better way to do things, and they decided to adopt an international version of the Lieber Code, which had been signed by Abraham Lincoln after the American Civil War. It outlawed the use of torture to get confessions, killing prisoners, using poisons, and putting proximity mines on respawn locations if you were playing GoldenEye. Russian Tsar Nicholas II was instrumental in setting up the Hague Convention of 1899, where a lot of this was agreed upon and signed by 26 countries. It also forbade bullets that expanded on impact, using balloons for bombing, and they also kindly agreed not to attack marked hospital ships. There was a follow-up in 1907 that covered a lot more maritime law. Once we had all those laws neatly written out on paper, we decided to celebrate by breaking them all in the horrific slaughter that was World War I. Where mustard gas filled the trenches, prisoners were used as forced labour, and nobody gave a flying monkey about any of the laws of combat. Henry Dunant was a Swiss businessman who became the first recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1901 for his humanitarian work, which led to the 1864 Geneva Convention and the setting up of the Red Cross. The first Geneva Convention agreed to protect all the people not actively trying to kill each other, such as the wounded, the civilians, the shipwrecked, and prisoners of war. We needed multiple other Geneva Conventions over the next 100 years, since each new war that passed proved that we were absolutely terrible at actually following them. But nonetheless, they are the cornerstone of most current humanitarian law. Now, if you break a law in your own country, then it's generally clear what the punishment is going to be. But none of these conventions have clear punishment written into them. So how do we know if they really work? I think you probably already know the answer. They don't. It's not to say that they don't have a value. We have to have some common agreement on what is acceptable or not during war, but they are extremely difficult to actually enforce. If you look at World War II, then the Nuremberg trials famously held various Nazi officers accountable for their actions. But what of the 10,000 prisoners who died of dehydration and malnutrition in the Rhein-Wiesenlager prison camps run by the Americans in occupied Germany? Or how about the 25,000 civilians who died when the British firebombed Dresden? Or the hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, of Germans raped by Soviets and other Allied forces after Berlin fell? Yes, I know, it's hard to believe, but the Allies weren't all goody two-shoes. This was war, after all. Even now, the Allies are pretty stubborn about dealing with what they got up to, and tend to ignore the atrocities that they committed during war. It's often been said that the victorious write the history books, but they also dictate their own punishments, or lack of in most cases. The Japanese are one of the few countries that admitted to breaches of the Geneva Convention, particularly to surrounding Asian nations such as South Korea and China. But an apology is mostly all that happened, and I'm not quite sure that a fear of saying sorry is going to keep Kim Jong-un's chubby finger off the nuclear button. So, has any progress actually been made? Are we any closer to really enforcing these rules of engagement? Well, maybe a little. When it comes to using illegal weapons, we've realised that the best way to stop people is to not let them have them in the first place. I know. Just like if you own a gun, then you're probably more likely to use it than someone who doesn't own a gun. When it comes to nuclear weapons, the 5 members of the UN Security Council possess them legally. That's China, Russia, France, the UK and the US, and only 4 other countries have them that we know of. India, Pakistan, Israel and North Korea. But they are not part of the treaty, so there's not a lot we can really do about it, except ask them really nicely not to end the world. But according to the treaties for chemical and biological weapons, all stockpiles should have been destroyed. No one should have kept some spares lying around in case of a rainy day. And any country in the treaty is supposed to be able to ask the UN to send inspectors to any other country to check that they're not hiding sarin gas behind the biscuit tin. For many of the wars in recent memory, including the current one in Syria, the use or suspected possession of chemical and biological weaponry has been the key reason given for the US and British interventions. And as you all know, all of those wars have been a resounding success, and everyone lived happily ever after. So yeah, international war conventions really do work. It's all totally fine and I'm just building that bunker in my garden for fun. No other reason, I swear. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more. 42. If we go back to the Middle Ages or even all the way back to the Roman Empire, was life ever any better? For this lakebed is littered with hundreds of skeletal human remains.